All right, good day. I believe the stream is starting. Let me verify that real quick. Yeah, it's streaming. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. How you doing? How are you doing? So, we are now in December 1942. Oh my gosh. Whoa. And maybe I gotta put on some headphones. Dog is barking. So, it was raining a moment ago, but it stopped raining. Dang it. I think I might have to go grab my headphones real quick because I can't focus on with this angry doggy barking the whole time. Plus, it doesn't make the quality of the video so good. Audio quality should be good though. We're gonna start the file. The file already started, but we're gonna continue from where I left off the other day. When was that? That was about I think I had it uploaded maybe a week ago or something like that. Something along those lines. I mean, I would have to really think hard about it. Ponder. I would have to ponder hard. And we're not gonna do that right now. I don't have the time to do that, man. I'm busy. So, let's start the file, and let's go ahead and play the game and see what comes. What can we? What can show up, pop up? What's gonna happen? So yeah, if you've made it this far in the journey, I know some of you are watching my videos. Well done. Maybe if you want to go public, I would say maybe comment below what state you're from, right? Because most of my audience is American, so clearly what state you're from is valuable. Because we're not Axis and Allies, we are a Eurofront community here. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem very clear to me that the community is ready or interested in having Eurofront tournaments in I don't know where at, maybe Chicago or something. So, no, I don't think the community is ready for that. So most of you guys who are we're right on the edge though, right? As far as going into the deep end of wargaming, right? We haven't touched Case Blue at all in this channel. And as far as I know, there may be a few other people who have maybe given a few reviews on a game like Case Blue. Obviously, the community at BoardGamesGeek.com, the forums are quite buzzing when it comes to a game like that. There are many more games from there forward, from there onward. And you think it stopped there. In fact, there's actually software versions of some of these games. But because of time, all of this that we're doing is turn-based. It seems pretty clear to me that we want to focus on turn-based sequences, if at all possible. And so that's what this game is about. It is about, it does have some connection to Axis and Allies because they're all sequence-based games. But the clear difference is Europe engulfed, that is. I'll pop up the game one more time to be very clear. I didn't pull up the rule book. That was my oopsie daisies. But here it is. This is where I keep my rule books, and I've gotten them all from different websites, but I think I got them officially from Columbia Games, and it was free to download. And so I already had it open before, but I'm gonna open it a second time. Maybe I can close that and open this up, and then I'll go ahead and open up here, and then we'll kind of move this over here, right over here to the corner. And then I can move this up a little bit. All right, so hopefully, let's see, we can check to see where that's at, right? Make sure you guys are able to read the rule book with me. So, yeah, here we are. Here we are in the game. But I wanted to pull up Europe Engulf for some reason right now, because that's really where my journey, if you guys even care about myself, that's where my journey began with wargaming. It started when I started playing Europe Engulf, but it was inspired by Axis and Allies. clear as day, the Axis and Allies was a lot to unpack, but the mechanics didn't make a whole lot of sense. It did, and yet it didn't. So here's the game. This was a really cool game. Cost me like $80. I think my grandmother gave it to me as a like birthday gift or Christmas gift or something like that, or simply a gift. And we bought like a new version on Board Games Geek. I was able to order it. It was not a new version that I bought. I bought it used, and it was in good condition until like it went through some kind of wear and tear under my hands, and it got worn down. I mean, the cover is like, oh, yeah, I think one corner got torn. I think I must have stepped on it at some point. The whole box is totally worn down because it's cardboard. But I know that some of you probably do a much better job at like caretaking the board games. I do not, for one reason or another. I try my best. I try my dang hardest to keep the quality up, but it's like once I own it, it's hard for me to sell it again because it's so used. Why would anyone want to buy a used board game like that, or a used book or anything? So yeah, here's the cover though, but I want to see like the map, I want to see like the board itself, not simply the box. It's a really, oh my gosh, okay, a bunch of geography. No one cares about that. Not in this channel. The weather. What's going on here? This is not the best search. I think this is what I'm looking for. This is a JPEG, presumably some kind of JPEG of the game, and this is maybe more in alignment of what may be going on. This is really interesting, but this is like a digital version of the game, and you can tell, I mean, this is obviously Europe. There's UK or Britain. France is pale blue. Spain is neutral. Turkey neutral. All these other countries all neutral. Germany gray. Italy green. Light green, to be clear. The Americans are the dark green. And then obviously the Soviets are red. And you can see some of the stacking up and everything and all the pieces. It's a really cool little setup they have here. But yeah, I mean, the game I played against, I wish I remembered his name. I would have to look up my emails again to see who I was playing with. I think his name had either his last name or his first name was with M. And he was excellent. I mean, he landed. I was playing in Germany. I was fighting on two fronts, and I could not hold the front. And by I think it was by like March, February, May 45. I mean, he steamrolled me on all fronts. So it was, and I tried my dang hardest. I mean, I definitely took a gamble, to be clear, but yeah, he completely steamrolled me. And it was a fascinating game. But I fought until the very end of the game, and that's one of maybe the only few times I've actually played one of these games from beginning to end. He was playing Europe in Gulf. It was not Eurofront. So here we are. And so like now, right, this is like a level up because the game obviously has more hexes and it's a bit more operational. There is an operational quality to this game. Obviously, it all comes down to the dice rolls, right? And the dice are pretty wonky. I think in my last series, which I never finished, someone commented like, "Whoa, the Americans were steamrolled that Panzer column or whatever it was that basically was used that we assembled to counterattack the American landing, and it didn't work. And basically, the Americans took somewhere like northern Italy. I think it was somewhere around here." Yeah, it was north of Rome, and they completely the Americans just can of whoop ass, literally were able to take those positions. So it was fascinating. It all came down to dice rolls. I think they had a few double fire. They had some air support, which I believe was at triple fire. So obviously, air power combined with double fire, like naval artillery, was enough to counter a Panzer Corps or a Panzer Army, or maybe some kind of like Panzer something. There is a name for it. I don't think it's Totenkopf, but like Schlossgruppen or something like that. Panzerschloss, something like that. Shout out to Citino. But basically, that's what the German army, that's what the Wehrmacht was doing late war, like 39 onwards, post Citadel, because they couldn't launch full large scale, campaigns or operations like they did in 40, 41, 42, because for some reason or another they simply couldn't. And I think that question, for any military historians who watch this channel, is a question that as of 2026 is still worth exploring and trying to answer and assess. Why couldn't they launch these large scale operations? What is the nature of the fighting that allowed, or rather denied, them to launch those operations? And so it's very fascinating. There's a whole many layers to unpack there. But they clearly succeeded in the Ardennes forest as far as intelligence goes. And they did make a breakthrough, and that's the famous Battle of the Bulge. And that's why, like, if you're an American, right, if you're a boomer, right, boomer generation, right, which I think was born in the 50s, and their parents were the 50s generation family, they basically, like, are fascinated by the Bulge. If you really want to get a deeper taste of what the Bulge was like, I highly recommend the World War II Museum out in New Orleans, because there's a whole section in the museum where it's like you are in the Bulge, and it's fascinating, right? And then the next session after that, I think it was Guadalcanal. After that, it was a jump from the Army to the Marine Corps, right, or to the Corps rather. And it's like it was kind of the same sort of messy, like, infantry type situation, basically sleeping on snow or sleeping in the swamp, and that seems to capture the attention of the boomers the most, is the living conditions of the infantry. But for as far as like the larger scale nature of the operation, like how was the Wehrmacht even able to launch the operation in the first place? You would have to read books, basically, and there are some really good books. I think there's one called Armageddon, 1944-45, that captures the essence of the downfall of the Wehrmacht operationally across both West and East, but the story clearly focused more on the West and the campaigns of the West. He touches on Aachen. I would have pronounced it Aachen, but apparently it's Aachen, right? So for those of you who know now, you know. And then you also have like he started to talk about the Bulge, and apparently one of the weaknesses that the Wehrmacht had was effectively like limited infantry. They didn't have the assault infantry that they used to. The morale was very low with the infantry, combined with the complications of the armor, right? Like they weren't enough to go to basically break through the American anti-tank, presumably battalions that were holding the line against the advancing elite German Ardennes offensive formations, right? And so there was some kind of like the combat changed in that moment, or in that particular operation. And also, I mean, disregarding weather, right? I mean, in this game, there is not even a snow scenario in the West. There is no snow scenario in the West. In a game like Europe and Golf, you can actually activate one of the special rules, which allows the German army to have a surprise bonuses, like additional hit bonuses during a mud turn. So that clearly was to like tailor the game to the Wehrmacht's ability for surprise attacks, or the Third Reich's ability for surprise operations, rather. But if we look at like this table, right, and we go on the Western Front, I mean, you can see very clearly here, or maybe you don't see it here because my big old head is in the way. You got to see mud, 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 mud on the West. There is no snow turn on the West. It's only mud. When we know that like December, around Christmas time, 44, on the Western Front, somewhere in Belgium or France, you basically, or Luxembourg, you basically have snow. So why doesn't this game show snow? And I believe that the designers of this game, of Europe and Golf, and of Eurofront, both, but they seem to have a similarity there. It appears to me that their focus was on strategic design. And so somehow they concluded that the snow in the West is not as bad as the snow in the East. And that actually might have a degree of truth. because if you play on the Eastern Front, right? I mean, the snow, there is mud on the east as well. Absolutely. 100%, right? The Rasputitsa, right? You got a bunch of freaking mud all the time. And you also don't really have like modernized roads. You don't have like, presumably, like tar roads. I mean, in the US, everything is made out of tar, right? But in the East or in Western Europe, I don't know what they were using for the quality of the roads. Was it tar or was it cement? I'm not sure. I know that the airfields were made out of cement. But well, comment below, what were the Western infrastructure roads made out of in Europe in, say, 44, 44 of which in December 25th? And that's kind of my question. Now, because we don't know, and this is regarding all of that, November, December, January, February, and March are apparently not that. What we're dealing with here, December, January, February, is not, oh, it's snowing. No, we're dealing with like it's been there's been, excuse me, there's been blizzards for like the last, I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that. Like 2 weeks of nonstop blizzards, 10 days of nonstop snowing, or something ridiculous along those lines, and you've got no shelter anywhere. You're out in the Russian steppe. You're out in, not Siberia apparently, but you're out in the Russian steppe where there is no road. The roads are limited, vast empty space, foresty terrain. Presumably, some areas are more rougher terrain than other areas. There may be hills in some sectors. Who knows? But you'd have to talk to Glance about that. But basically, the assessment is that there's a lot of snow. I mean, we're talking like so much snow that like you need the kind of the finish, or I guess apparently, like, I don't know what they're called, the little tennis rackets that you put on your feet, right? So that you can walk on the snow. I don't think the Wehrmacht army had any of that equipment in Winter 41. Now, they did actually try their best to supply winter clothing, but it was a question of, do they supply ammunition or do they supply winter clothing? The logistics were limited and they prioritized ammunition. But I'm sure some formations and some units and some individual soldiers even received winter clothing in December 41. And if you look at the photographs, which that's a whole another side, that's the qualitative side of like historical analysis, you would eventually find photographs that can support that observation, basically saying, okay, these guys got winter clothing, right? And they got like clothes to stay warm for the winter. Or there's some movies that you can watch, an Italian film, right, of like this guy, he's an Italian. He ends up being drafted into the Wehrmacht, the Third Reich Army, or something along these lines. He ends up being all the way out in the Eastern Front. I don't know if it's pre or post Stalingrad, but he is basically watching German soldiers machine gun down civilians to get winter clothing. And so as a result of that, it's like maybe that's what they had to do. There was a lot of improvisation that was done in terms of getting what they needed, right? And when it came to like consuming supplies, it was, as the good old saying goes, scorching earth policy. But it wasn't only the Soviets who were doing scorching earth policy when they were withdrawing in 41. It was the Wehrmacht that was doing scorching earth policy when they were withdrawing in 43. Both sides did scorching earth. And I believe that's basically no different than like the Mongolian pillage and rape. You basically take what you need and you move on. Regardless of what happens to the civilian, the people, human beings that were living in those areas at the time. But we're kind of like going into more into the humanities, right? As far as historical analysis, you would have to talk to like the World War II channel, right? And I'm more of a disciple of Indy Neidell as far as like studying military history. So as a result of that, it's pretty clear to me that that's our focus on our channel, right? We're war gamers. We simply command the formations and so on. We don't really focus on the civilian side, but there's obviously some kind of overlap there to unpack. And it has a lot to do with like preparation for operations. And so these three areas, right, or I guess including November, depending on the dice roll, or I guess maybe March as well. Basically, you have like deep, heavy snow. I mean, I'm thinking if it's anything like the snow in like New York State, like I'm talking like Albany, New York, right? Like, upper New York. I would say that like, yeah, you probably have like with no one doing like shoveling or salt on the roads. Yeah, you're probably having like what 10 feet of snow. 10 feet, which would be like 3 meters of snow or more. Maybe you have, yeah, who knows? At the very least. And keep in mind that they didn't have like snow blowers. They didn't have maybe some shovels. They didn't have snow shovels. They had like regular shovels. And like, what about like how do you defend a position like that? And from like a training perspective, that is why the Wehrmacht paralyzed in Winter 41. Operationally, tactically, there was no training the Wehrmacht did in the lead up to Barbarossa that actually allowed them to be prepared for the winter. They decided to start preparing, I think around August or September, when it was clear that the Soviet army wasn't going to collapse anytime soon, or wasn't going to collapse within a week or 2 weeks was their time frame, maybe a month. And so they started preparing more long term. What went on in 42 is something that I cannot fully explain. You got to talk to other historians about that. But by 43, it was quite clear. Goebbels announced the Totalitarian speech, his famous speech in post Stalingrad February, or was it March 43? And he convinced the German people that they had to go to total war. And the German people agreed in 30 plus 13 years, that would be 43. And so the year would be 43 when that happened. And it shows with Citadel. It shows with the production of Tiger tanks or Panther tanks. It shows with the development of Panzerschreck or Panzerfaust. It shows with a larger production of Nebel warfare. And all this kind of odd Wehrmacht special weaponry, you could call it. And as the war deteriorated, the complexity, or rather the kind of radicality of the ridiculousness of the special weapons evolved. And in 44, you eventually have, right, the rockets. You do have some pretty impressive technology, but it wasn't enough to turn the tide against good old-fashioned, steady, consistent industrial production that both the Soviets and the Americans in particular were able to pull off. The British, we can't. There's nothing there. A couple of Lancasters. I mean, really, they could have produced more mosquitoes. Come on. So, anyways, having said that, I think I've covered the why the Tiger tank didn't win the war type of video or type of conversation. We're playing a strategic game. We don't have Tiger tanks, at least not visibly in these formations. We're simply playing good old-fashioned dice and positioning as far as formations go, and columns and so forth. Maybe not columns, but corps, armies, divisions. There's definitely a divisional element here with the dice rolls, but it's not clear how that works. So we're going to start the file, where the file already started, rather. There's my introduction, and let's dive in. I'm really excited. I don't know how much energy I can put into this video, frankly, but I think I can put in, because of time, like, I think I can put in maybe like, I'm going to try to go for like another 20 minutes and see if that is enough, like if I have the endurance to play another freaking couple turns in a game like Eurofront. I know that some people probably would be on like turn 5 or 6 by now. It's like I am not even on turn 1 right now, apparently. So we're going to start with the British. The British, I think right now, since it's 42, I think the British strategic situation is more about defend, ironically. There is no cool like commando, anything that's going on here. But we did pull off a second landing. We had a landing in 41 during Barbarossa. That worked. We landed somewhere where the Wehrmacht wasn't available. And these operations actually succeeded. So presumably, I would have to like look back at the Battle of France video. but presumably the British did a better job at withdrawing in this game than they did in Dunkirk, presumably, or at least morale was really strong, stronger than at Dunkirk, presumably, because apparently the British Army wanted to come back and kind of like, they wanted more savory flavors of combat, presumably, and so they landed here in Normandy 41, and it worked. Also, I mean, I may have under strengthened the Western Atlantic Wall in 41, but I mean, we did succeed as the Wehrmacht with a counteroffensive, but by the time it happened, the British had already pulled out. And so now it's a second landing, this time in Ostend, and it worked yet again. This time it worked. I mean, so far, talk about 2 home runs. And so basically, what's the situation for the British? Nothing. We're going to simply hold the line. Now, I believe when this area is contested, the British can't use the HQ marker as a additional port. So withdrawing from this position is complex. I don't think we can withdraw all the units. And so I think right now, if I were the British, right, and we have 4 corps, the equivalent of a army group or something along these lines, or maybe 1 army, it's like, okay, we basically, somebody's going to have to be left behind. It's not going to be the French because the French surrendered 2 years ago. Somebody else is going to have to be the rear guard and hold this position while everybody else is able to evacuate. Now, the Germans haven't counterattacked, so the situation strategically for the, I guess it would be West here or something like that. Ost here, Ost is east. But like, what is, I guess I'm still learning German. It'd be kind of cool to know. But let's see here, I'll flip it, and then like Army of the West. Let's see what pops up. Army des Westen. Ost here. Let's see, what is that? Ost, okay, no. Army of, no. Ost here. Eastern Army. Okay, what about Western Army? West here? That's what I would do. Go to, oh, snap, that may have worked. West here. Oh, snap. Yeah, so the Vestia is not prepared. They presumably would have been operationally prepared to counterattack at Normandy, but they were not operationally prepared to counterattack at Belgium. We didn't have a fortress. And again, the details of that, I mean, we're going to have to save that for the other front. So having said that, for the British turn, though, let's continue. Let's see what we can pull off. Nothing going on in the West. At least not right now, because the British are holding the line from the British perspective, to be clear. Now, we do have this 21st Army group. It's the British 8th Army. And we did eventually, like, kind of establish, you could say some kind of, like, British government in Benghazi. And now, there's a long road from El Agheila all the way to Tripoli, and the actual length is quite far. Right, these hexes are 60 kilometers on the side, so that's 120 kilometers per hex. Regardless of El Agheila, we got 1 hex, 2 hex, 3 hex, 4 hex, 5 hex, 6 hex. So like 6 times 120, we're talking about like 720 kilometers at the very least, maybe like 800 kilometers. It's a long journey, especially across some desert road. So the logistics are very limited. It takes time for those trucks to get and supply this 21st Army Group. That's why this HQ right now costs, it's under road supply, it costs 20 production points, which is double the cost of what it would be if it was in sea supply or rail supply. Right? So as a result of that, they probably are actually underselling it there. I mean, for all we know, it could be like some kind of ratio or something there, but clearly the difference or the distance is quite far. And it's because of this dang old desert road, which is not going to get muddy from rain, because it never rains in Libya, from what I understand. At least in this game, it never rains. And it certainly doesn't snow, but it does have desert storms, like windstorms. These storms, these storms of sand that can pop up. Maybe that's what they're dealing with as well. So this HQ is at a range, right? It's at a level 2. The command range is 2, so it's not even in range to strike Tripoli. But we did break through. We did fracture the Axis position here at Misurata, and so like I don't know what's going on with the Axis at the moment. It's been a while since I played, but basically like the British have broken through this line, the Misurata line, and now all they have to do is take Tripoli. It's only a matter of time before they take it. The entire British Eighth Army is very confident right now, full strength, and all it's got to do is strike into the city itself and actually get into the city and take the dang like administration building or whatever the Nazi government has in that position there in Tripoli. 42, not Tobruk. 43. So yeah, there's that. And then so let's see what we can do here. Also being very cautious because the Axis are stacked up strong in Greece. They could launch an amphibious invasion, and they could land. Try to go for Alexandria. I think they tried and it failed because the Royal Navy was able to repulse the amphibious operation, the naval operation that is. So they succeeded at repulsing. The Royal Navy did that work. And look, I don't know if they'll launch another one, but like if we want to have Alexandria defended in case they do arrive at the city itself, we want to have at least like one division available, ideally two. Right now we have presumably 3 divisions, something the equivalent of 3 divisions, able to protect Alexandria. If we lose Alexandria, the entire supply situation in Egypt effectively collapses, moving from Alexandria west. But if they land in Tobruk, right, if the Axis do decide to take Tobruk, they can take it. We have nothing. We don't have a large force to repulse the landing. But they're going to have to deal with all of the Royal Navy like interdiction operations because the Royal Navy controls the Ionian Sea because they took Benghazi. They also control Alexandria because they take in. I mean, because it's Alexandria, they control the Eastern Mediterranean. So these two bodies of water are effectively under the sphere of dominance of the Royal Navy at the moment. So the Axis could go for Tobruk, maybe for political reasons. Maybe the Italians try to land in Tobruk, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they try to pull that off. But as far as like affecting the strategic kind of momentum of the conflict, it's not going to do anything at the moment. So there's that. So we're going to fortify Benghazi, though, because if we lose Benghazi, this entire 8th Army will be out of supplies. Losing Benghazi is a whole nother story, right? But if we lose Tobruk, some of the supplies will have to come by sea, but it already is coming in by sea, so it doesn't affect the supply lines. So there's that. So yeah, I think all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and activate this theater HQ. Right, the Mediterranean Theater HQ. Does it have a name? I think it's just called like ME, right? Something like this. I probably should zoom in because, I want to zoom in so you guys can take a closer look. You guys and gals, guys and or gals, guys and gals, guys and females. And then we're going to move the 21st, and we're simply going to put it in Sirte. I think that's all I'm going to do. And now the HQ, Montgomery can enjoy like a kebab or whatever they sell in Sirte, and he can eat a good kebab. And from there, it's like, okay, now we're now in range to take Tripoli. Attract or attack was what I wanted to say, but slightly my math said attract Tripoli. All right, so there's that. We're going to deactivate this HQ, not deactivate that HQ. And then I think that's it. One simple turn, right? Very subtle move. And that's it for the British. There's nothing more that we can do. Now, it is winter on the Eastern Front, so we're going to switch gears and go straight to the Soviets. And we're going to see what the Soviet army can do. Now, I've talked a lot in my last video about the Soviet situation, and it's not great. It has a lot of room for improvement. The main problem right now is that the entire southern wing, the entire southern front, southern front is basically we don't have a stable front line at the moment. We don't have anything that can go toe to toe with apparently a secondary German line, our Axis line right now from Voronezh all the way down to Rostov. And why is that the case? Because apparently in our game, the Red Army is absolutely getting pummeled at Moscow. the Soviet defensive lines are very strong, and they've taken heavy beatings. I mean, like the defense at Moscoow is strong. I mean, we've got the Fourth Shock Army, right, at 75, maybe potentially 80% effective combat capability. They're good at defending. They're not good at attacking. Clearly. Then you got the Third Tank Army that was sent in as a reserve to defend Moshaïsk. Great. Then we've also got the defense at Kaluga. This defense is comprised of primarily the 10th Army, supported by the, believe the 12th Mech Corps, and presumably another Mech Corps that's there as well. It's actually 2 Mech Corps. I think each Mech Corps is about 500 tanks, 500 T-34s, something along those lines. Not division, I think it's corps. Who knows how many thousands of tanks in 42. The formations are not all that different from 41, only that they're in more abundance than they were in 42, rather than they were in 41. But, you know, and maybe like the maintenance has improved and so on and so forth as far as like the vehicles and whatnot. T-34s, there may be slightly more T-34s, but I don't think the actual volume of T-34s didn't change all that much from 41 to 42. Again, you know, if you want to dive deep, if you want to be dense about that and less intense, then, you know, my suggestion is answer the question if you have the time and energy and resources and research and so forth to figure out what's the difference in T-34 production, T-34 to be clear, from 41 to 42 for the Soviet Union. And then we're not even talking about how many were operational or how many were actually being deployed to formations. Really start with the question of how many were available, 41, 42, ready, fueled with like whatever the Ivan tank man was eating, and also like oiled up with petroleum, and also like having enough ammunition for maybe 1 day or 2 days rather of combat. I would imagine that's the like essentially the bottom line along those lines. Also, you got to consider like how many machine gun rounds of ammunition did they have available too. T-34 did have machine guns. So yeah, and then of course we got the Second Tank Army there, right? And it is definitely beginning to kind of like, you know, fumble or fracture under the pressure of the Wehrmacht army. German casualties have also been really high. We can actually look at the German casualties right now and kind of get somewhat of an assessment of the casualties. There's nothing here I have on destroyed panzers, right? But presumably they're pretty high. But like if I have the months for 42, right? Summer 42, I mean, as far as how many like steps were lost, 42 breakthrough was 28, right? Then July was 7, August was 11, September was 15, October was 19. So it's been steadily going up since the breakthrough period from June 42. I think June 42, if you've been following so far, if you remember, it's like the German army broke through basically between somewhere like Orel and I believe it was Vorshilovgrad, right? Yeah. It was basically the open steppe. I mean, yeah, it was around Kursk, but like the main battles probably involved Belgorod, sure, Kursk. But again, this is a 42 operation. It did not have the buildup that we saw in the historical 43. And so, and also keep in mind there was battles at Orel, but the Germans did sustain heavy losses, suggesting that the Red Army operationally did something correctly. Now, of course, it all comes down to the dice, but I would have presumed that it was something along the lines that the Soviets had very functional T-34s in this battle, or maybe better anti-tank units, or maybe slightly better positioned artillery, and so on and so forth, that allowed them to inflict notable casualties on the Germans. Again, we're only focusing on German casualties, 22,000 troops per step. It's a little bit more than a division. So in June, the Germans sustained 616,000 casualties in our game. Now, if you study like Stalingrad, I think the German casualties, the Axis casualties in total, didn't go more than like 800,000. So the casualties were notable here. I think the casualties, it's not even clear to me like how many casualties were sustained in Case Blue, before Stalingrad, because that by that point it was another operation. But I would tell you that like it was not as high. I don't think. I think the Germans were really just like cross countrying, crossing a lot of territory without as many critical battles as you would imagine. Um, and the Red Army was booking it. They were escaping. I think in our scenario, the Red Army failed to break through. That's why the Soviet casualties were at 40. Right, so 40 times 25 is 1,000,000 casualties for the Red Army. That's significant. It's much higher than what we saw historically in Case Blue. Presumably, most of those units were encircled, or a significant percentage were encircled. And again, we're talking about large pockets. We're not talking about the surrendering of individual smaller, like, say, rifle corps or rifle divisions, presumably, so on and so on and so on. So let's go from there. So that was June. That was the breakthrough phase, and then from what I have been able to recall, what a World War II historian has been able to recall in our game scenario, is that they started to encroach on Moscow, right? By that stage, there was a few more breakthrough operations crossing the Don River. By that point, it was kind of like a rear guard, a Red Army defense, and the Soviets had already established a new strategic line that extended somewhere along the lines of Ryazsk all the way to Tambov, right? And so that's kind of where we are now, and it kind of shows, right? They've been able to rebuild a few armies, rebuild a few cadre here and there, but a lot of makeshift formations, right, have been built up way back in Saratov, way back in Stalingrad. There hasn't been a large buildup of Soviet reserves, at least not in the Soviet playstyle that we've been playing. And I'm not exactly sure. I can't really answer that question. All I can say is that playing as the Red Army is tricky. But I think our priority was to fortify Moscow. And there was a moment, I know that there was a window of opportunity to launch a counter attack or counter stroke at Ryazsk, and it failed, right? Because we didn't attack. I'm quite sure if it was Stavka, if it was Stalin, if it was any other general, they would have attacked Ryazsk, and they probably would have achieved some kind of success. The Wehrmacht was vulnerable in that window, and we didn't attack, and I believe that was a large blunder in this game. But I'm still learning how to play the game. But it would have been a very risky operation. This game involves a lot of risk, and it's I decided against it. Why? Because I didn't want it to be a total Red Army disaster, and it would have further accelerated German Army momentum, and presumably, who knows what had happened. So it wasn't so much a counteroffensive like a 41 offensive at Smolensk. It was more like a localized counterstroke. Soviet losses were probably high, but as you can see here, the formations are quite strong. They have yet to launch a codename operation against the Wehrmacht in this moment. But you can see there are two Soviet tank armies, the 1st and the 5th. There's also the 22nd Soviet Army, and then you also have the 3rd Shock Army, right? And I think the 22nd is not even guard yet. That's not until 43. So that's where we are right now. We kind of played the long-term game, and the Soviets have decided to coalesce around Moscow, and they've essentially decided to dig in, hold the line, and let the German army come to them. And the Wehrmacht has struck hard, but casualties have been high on both sides, right? So we can assess that a little bit with what we got here. I mean, Soviet casualties, July was 12, August 11, September 15, October 10. It was actually less there. But the Soviets have been fighting very, very well, toe-to-toe, with the Wehrmacht during this entire time, and still hasn't been enough to kind of win this sort of attritional war. Now, keep in mind that in our game, we went for Leningrad. We took Leningrad, and presumably in this game, that made all of the difference, possibly, potentially. I did have the Finnish help take Leningrad, right? There's a Finnish formation that's still occupying Leningrad, which may not be historically accurate. So maybe for future games, I may not actually allow the Finnish army to occupy Leningrad or even help in taking Leningrad, which, geopolitically may have made more sense in 41 with the Finnish continuation war. It was not their objective to take Leningrad. They had no interest in Leningrad whatsoever, there's a lot to unpack there for sure. But in our game, the Finnish supported, and Leningrad fell quite swiftly. So we sent, I think, 2 panzer armies to Leningrad, so the Wehrmacht was able to take it. Now, in this game, the Soviets lose 6 production points regardless of whether or not Leningrad falls, right? Because it would have been under siege, the supply lines should have been cut off, and so on. But because the Wehrmacht succeeded in taking Leningrad, they gained 6 additional production points. And I think the Wehrmacht production point on the Eastern Front is like anywhere between 70 to 80. So I'll take like an average of like maybe 75. Let me verify that. If I go to like the Eastern Front, strictly the East Front version of the game, and we look at the Axis production for like Summer 41, right? It's at 54, right? But of course, we haven't included Ukraine. We haven't included, whatchamacallit, Leningrad, right? I mean, this includes, like, eventually you take Minsk, Riga, Bryansk, Kiev, right? I'm talking about the Donetsk industrial basin when I specify when I'm speaking on Ukraine, right? Which is like 10 production points additional. If we go to the Winter 41, Axis production is at 71, so it's a quite a boost. Without even taking Leningrad, it's quite high. If we go to Summer 42, it's 80 because they transfer more from the Western Front. And if we go to Winter 42, it's 83, so it went even up a bit more because they take what is it, Grozny? No, they take this oil site here, which was significant. I was going to say Moscoow, but that's not correct. We can look at it in a moment. And then 43, it's at 90. So even though, like, strategically it's more of a stalemate in 43, the Axis production is still going up. Right now, our Axis production, to be clear, I think it's at 90 right now, and it's 42. So the Axis have really been able to, like, double down on production, and, well, that's not the right table, and because of that, it's quite clear to me that the Axis are able to, sustain their war of attrition a bit more. And so apparently it's at 92. That, like, basically 12 production difference. I know that six of it is coming from Leningrad, and then the other 6, I'm not sure where it's coming from exactly, which is a good question to kind of explore, right? But maybe it's like, yeah, maybe I miscounted. I'm not sure why the Axis production is so strong. We did take Tula. But, like, where else could that additional 6 production be coming from, right? Rostov, like, what's the difference between what we have right now in production and, say, what we have in 42, historically? All right, if I go, it's a very subtle difference. If I go to, like, Winter 42, right? Axis production is at 83. If I go to Summer 42, it's at 80. So right now we're at 92. I think the additional 3 come from Finland. There is a diplomatic rule that allows you to transfer the entire production from Finland to the Osttier, effectively, or to the Third Reich in the east, and the result is 3 more additional production points as a result. And as a result of that, what do you have? You have 3 more, right? Presumably those 3 more would have been like Voronezh, Tula, and Rostov. I think Summer 42, they didn't take Rostov yet. They haven't taken Rostov yet. You can see, it's kind of hard to tell, but I can see it pretty clearly. Rostov wasn't taken. So that's the 3 production difference that's going on there. So having said that, I think I might stop here. And maybe I do like a part 2, something like this. I might take like a quick break. I could do like a live stream, right, and just keep the stream going. And I don't know if I do or don't. I'm not really sure, but we did do the British turn. We already started the sequence, so we clearly need to finish at least this month, I believe, in order to like kind of like stay like organized as far as like finishing the sequence. So yeah, but like as far as like my endurance goes, I mean, I think the 20-minute time frame has passed already, and we haven't even done the Soviet operation, right? But it's clear to me that the Soviet, I mean, I kind of want to assess Soviet casualties. I want to assess, obviously 1 million in June, but what about the Battle of Moscow that has been going on basically since like July 42? because the Germans didn't launch an offensive in 41, and the Soviets launched a limited offensive in 41 as well. But it's been more of like a strategic stalemate, effectively, around Moscow. Maybe it's like the siege of Moscow, something along those lines. But obviously, from July onwards, the Wehrmacht shifted their momentum from Voronezh, and they went forward to Moscow. They did not cross the Don River in the south, right? They didn't go for Stalingrad. There was a moment where they may have, but they decided not to. And it looks like the Soviets apparently are investing all their resources right now on Moscow, and it shows, right? It clearly shows with like the amount of casualties that have been sustained, and it shows with the fact that they still have a very powerful reserve still available, right? We still got a reserve shock army. We got a couple shock armies in reserve. That's amazing. But it's quite like it appears to be a strategically defensive posture, and there was some limited counteroffensive abilities out of Ryazk. But like, where else can the Soviets strike? There is no other Soviet front, right? There's no other Soviet tank army or shock army available to push against the Germans. So the front line, as far as I can tell, from like Voronezh south, is a total stalemate. I got a dang old fly landing on my knee there. But it's like, okay, so what's going to go on from here? What do we do? What can the Soviets do? And I think the Soviets need like basically an economic miracle right now. I mean, the Soviets need some kind of like, they need to find a way to take the pressure off of where the Wehrmacht has decided to concentrate the pressure, and find a way to basically repulse the Germans in some notable way, and that would require a flanking maneuver, essentially a strategic flank. And right now, I don't see it anywhere around Moscow, right? Because all the areas have been effectively locked down by this Wehrmacht army in the playstyle that the Wehrmacht have been doing. And I think the simple takeaway there, basically my simple understanding, my simple playstyle there, I really want to say it in words, I really do. But I believe that it's more valuable if one of you is interested in playing against me, and then I will show it a second time clearly how that is going to play out. And I think because of the stream or because of the recording session or whatever we do, that's going to be what allows the viewership to understand that the wargaming audience understand that there is a sort of like principle behind the Wehrmacht invasion that we've had in this game. It's not unique to Europe, to Eurofront. It exists in other war games as well. It certainly is the case in Europe and Gulf, and maybe the case in Axis and Allies. Maybe Axis and Allies has actually been able to balance that out. And then now it seems quite blatantly clear in this game too, as far as I can tell. And so, like, again, it has to be tested further. So it's like, it's kind of more like a, I don't know what to call, I don't know what my audience would call it. But it's kind of like a concept. I use the word principle, but like it may be more akin to something else that's much more profound. So yeah, that would require more to unpack. It surely has something to do around like the theory of like Soviet deep penetration, which was developed before the war but was not materialized until Operation Bagration, by which time the practice was very different than the theory, remarkably different than the theory, because the original theorist, I think, was like either sent in jail or I don't think he died. But he was eventually he was sent in prison for his theory, and yet it was his initial like concept that allowed the Red Army to emerge as the Great Phoenix, or at least the Soviet Air Force, that allowed them to then push against the Wehrmacht defensive fortress lines against the 88 flat guns, let's say, and then push on and actually make their way into Poland and eventually Germany itself. So, yeah, it's a very fascinating kind of moment, the 44 period. And we're not there yet. We're in the 42 period. And it's like, what's going to happen in 44? Right now, I don't think the Red Army needs more reserves. They need, like, a large reserve pool, and I'm not seeing it with the Red Army right now, right? Um, maybe not. It's hard to say. But I do want to stop the video here. I kind of want to pause it. I don't know if I can pause the stream. Is that even able? Can I do that? Let's see. I'm doing it like very clunkily. I may have to do 2 different videos. I think for the sake of editing, right? Because I'm not a big fan of editing. I may simply leave the stream running, and you know, it's gonna be up to the viewership to kind of skip ahead. You guys are gonna have to like click ahead, and you know, I'm gonna come back in like maybe 5 minutes. I'm thinking, maybe I want to take like ideally a 15-minute break. That's what I'm thinking. Take a good 15-minute break at the very least before I come back, and I might do that. I might take my time. Maybe have like I don't know, you know, a bag of chips or something, and take a quick break before we come back and actually continue the kind of assessment of the Soviet situation, assess the casualties, and so on and so on. That to me seems to be the most, you know, the most straightforward way to do it, the most pra way to do it. PRA. There's many words that you can go from there, but I would leave it at that. So I might do that. So I do appreciate your patience in this. Again, if it was a stream, it's totally fine, right? But I guess I will like turn down the audio here, right? So desktop audio, mic audio. I'm gonna, and I will be right back. And I'll set a timer. I think about a 15-minute timer, something along those lines. And I think that will give me plenty of time to kind of like, you know, prepare for the next phase of the Soviet planning, effectively, the Soviet style of preparing for operations. So yeah, we'll stop here. Again, you know, thank you for your attention in a video like this. And yeah, we'll be right back. You know, so like we'll be right back. All right, so I'll hit that button. Maybe I leave you with like a cool little, I don't know. We'll be right back. Intermission. I think that's what I'll do. That's too much. There we go. Let's find like a really pretty, just a simple intermission and an animation or something, or just like screen or something. I'll leave you with some music maybe. Oh my gosh, that's how the streamers do it. They do a great job with that. Let's find. Oh, let me do like this. No. I you know, clearly I was prepared for this. Maybe something along these lines, right? And then I guess I'll leave you with some kind of music. Intermission. Oh, dang it. Oh, dang it. Oh, this one's pretty cool too. It's not complete. Oh, there you go. Oh, this may be it. There you go. And then I kind of want like full screen. I guess save as image. And then I'll open it up on some kind of editor or something like this. And then I will, oh, it's not here. There it is. There we go. And then I guess I'll leave you some kind of music. You know, what's the taste of music, right? Probably like really sad music, right? Maybe like, I know exactly. I don't know if it's exactly copyrighted or not. It should be okay. Call of Duty 2 soundtrack. I think it's probably the best. It may or may not be copyrighted. I don't know, you know, how Call of Duty, I think it was Tripwire. No, there was 2 companies that were making Call of Duty. It was not Tripwire, it was the other one. But they did such a great job at doing it. Yeah, they probably should deserve a good shout out. They're probably the ones who have copyright to the music, but we'll see.
Let's turn music into notes. Go. Drag in the audio, name it, transcribe, and done.
No, we have to meet that. There you go. That's exactly what I was looking for. So we'll see. see if this works. If not, I'll edit it out. No problem. But I'll be right back, folks. 50 minutes. All right. Well, it looks like we are about the 19-minute mark now. And we are going to return to the stream. So let's dive back in. Welcome back. So let's do the Soviet assessment, yeah? So I hope you're able to take a good break. I would say tea break. Tea and biscuits. If you're British, apparently you need a tea and biscuit break. So, yeah. Soviet situation, I'll tell you, man, is, where are the Soviet armies? We're missing armies in this game. I need more Soviet armies. And there isn't any in this game. There's not enough units for the Soviets. That to me is very clear. So yeah, limited unit defense at Moscow. I mean, talk about intel failure. The Wehrmacht knows what we got. Because we got so many limited units, dog. So many limited units. Like, clearly, if it was historical, I mean, there would have been like 12 Soviet unit types stacked up per hex. In each hex. Something along these lines. Or more. And there would have been more units stacked up. And the German intelligence would have failed, guaranteed, because they didn't know how many units the Soviets had. There were so many. There were so many Soviet units. It's ridiculous how many units they had, and there weren't that many big. There wasn't that many troops. There wasn't that many units. There weren't that many troops in these formations. 5,000 troops per division. You have to have about 15,000 troops to create a division. And the Red Army had 5,000 per division at Berlin. The units were under strength big time. And it's not because they lacked necessarily manpower. It's because they had so many units. So it was definitely talk about a prioritization as far as where the focus was dedicated. There's one movie that I know of, one Russian film. I don't know if it was Russian or Bulgarian or something, but it was a film that was in Russian. The name I couldn't tell you, but it was on YouTube. It's free. You can look it up and find it. But there was one battle, right, where they were up against a German-occupied town. And was there German armor? I don't believe there was, but there was a German sniper. And the sniper may or may not have been neutralized with an anti-tank gun that was clearly a Pak-36, but it was Soviet wielded. Maybe it wasn't a Pak-36, but it's this equivalent of a Pak-36. Maybe it was a 37 millimeter, not a 36 millimeter. But basically, they used that to knock out what appeared to be a German Panzer III that showed up as the infantry were trying to attack. I think it was a machine gun position that it was neutralized, rather, with the Pak-37. And they were able to overtake the town. And it's a great film. It's probably my favorite Russian, or rather Soviet, war film about the war. Because it captured a very simple story of a man who was about to get executed. And ends up getting caught up in, taking a town. And was not executed. Something happens to his friend, though. His friend dies of artillery fire. which actually seems oddly enough quite historically accurate. And it was not the white tiger. It was nothing about that. No, it was more about this guy who was like about to get executed, and he like is a total goober or something, and he's able to survive the war. And there's one scene that really stood out to me. Maybe we like watch it together again. Comment below. Let me know if that's something that interests you. We can watch a free film on YouTube together, a Russian film of World War II. I think it would be definitely quite the insight. But essentially, there's a scene where he becomes, I believe, a Soviet officer, and he's like telling everybody what to do. But he must have been in Poland by that point in time, and they were moving around a bunch of equipment and supplies, and his job was to make sure everything was running smoothly. And so, yeah, by that stage, maybe there were less Russian units by that stage of the conflict, which is total cap. There was as many as there were in 41, but they were much better organized, and they had a much greater abundance of supplies. Presumably, a lot of it was Lend-Lease. Respectfully, there was a lot of Lend-Lease involved. Boots, I don't know about beer, but boots, chocolate, and apparently it was American chocolate, so it wasn't very good. But it was boots, chocolate, and then what else? Like Sherman tanks or something, or M3 Lees. I mean, they had something available in the thousands, and it's very fascinating. Who has information on this? Does it even exist as of 2026, or is it all gone? But like, exactly which Soviet units had M3 Lees, dude? They had thousands of them. They had more M3 Lees than the Battle of like the Libyan campaign, or like, yeah, something along those lines, or like whatever was going on in the desert at that time. So yeah, it's quite clear to me that the Soviets had a lot of Lend-Lease, but it's also quite clear that a lot of Soviet units had no Lend-Lease, or like very limited amounts of supplies, but they all had a lot of trucks. And I believe it was the GMC truck, which was a two-wheeler, to be clear. So it was very like reliable. And it's like, apparently it wasn't too bad to change the tires on those. But like if you watch Band of Brothers, you'll see those tanks, those trucks in action. And it's like, yeah, those trucks are really big. I mean, there's not that many trucks even as of 2026 that have those kind of tires. I'll tell you, they don't exist. It's like the right size tire, not too big, not too small, and it works, and the maintenance is quite straightforward. It works, it's functional. Whoever like was getting those tires to work like knew that the tires were replaceable, and so on and so on. So yeah, here we are in 2026, and it's like, where are those GMC freaking Band of Brother trucks, dog? I haven't seen any. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. It's hard to say, but they were really good trucks. And they were in a great abundance. There was thousands, tens of thousands, apparently, that were sent over to the Soviets. So apparently they're still being used in 2026 somewhere in some state of the former Soviet Union or something along these lines. But like, who is still using them as of now? And it's like, wow. Okay. All right. What more to say on that? Boots. They had lots of boots. Also, what kind of boots did they have? It's a great question. Apparently, they were American boots. What were the American boots? What was the brand, and so on and so on? Did they have any M&Ms? Right? Did they, like, what else did they have that was American, that was being put on those boxes and sent over to the Soviets? Keep in mind, it was probably the same port that the Americans tried to invade Bolshevik Russia in the Russian Civil War. It was like the same port. It came from the east. It did not come from like Persia or like Archangel in the north. A lot of the supplies came way out where there was no U-boats anywhere nearby. The Japanese had some submarines, sure. Apparently there were submarines in Pearl Harbor. Like 5 submarines in Pearl Harbor. But like the Japanese didn't have thousands of submarines the way the Americans had the big submarines that were like sinking who knows how many tons of supplies of Japanese shipping of the Japanese Empire when the Japanese or post-Japanese conquest of like Indochina and Philippines. Like, whoa, there's a lot there. And it's like by 44, even if the Japanese won Okinawa or Iwo Jima, which was 45, but like even if they won out there, the battles, they would have lost the tons of shipping, of ships being sunk by massive American ships, submarines with apparently terrible torpedoes. But apparently, like, they did fix the torpedo, and by 44, there was I don't know, but like the quote-unquote, like, Atlantic battle in the Pacific was bigger because it was a bigger ocean. And the Japanese were not the ones sinking the ships. It was the Americans that were sinking the ships. So the American submarines were like overpowered, OP, like very overpowered. Apparently, they were better than the German U-boats. Apparently. So, like, what's going on with that? I mean, that's a whole nother side quest. But I'll tell you, like, there was nothing that could have stopped the American ships from arriving in Russia or Siberia or from Alaska or wherever they were coming from. There was nothing in 44, 43 that could have stopped that the Axis had available, right? If you've ever been to some of those museums, you'll see like how many American plane types existed versus how many Axis plane types existed. And it's day and night. It clearly shows that the Allies had more airplane variants than the Axis did, clearly. And so it's like, wow, I mean, what's up with that? And apparently the story has to do with supplies and shipping. Because apparently there was even aircraft that were being shipped out on those boats. The Americans sent P-39 Cobras to the Soviets. And the Soviets had like a modified 37mm cannon on the dang P-39s that were going toe-to-toe with BF-109s. And they won a lot of those engagements as early as 42. So it's like, wow, those were Soviet aircraft. Those were Soviet planes. They were built in America or built by Americans, but like the everything that made the plane work and succeed was because of the Soviet doctrine in 42. I don't know how many inputs the Americans actually had in that. But it's fascinating to understand that and explore that and consider that. So that's where we are now. I mean, where's the critical air battle taking place? This game doesn't capture the air battle whatsoever. But presumably there's been some major Luftwaffe airstrikes, like around Moscoow, around Kaluga, Atula, which was like our Stalingrad. I mean, how many aircraft does the Luftwaffe have in this game, given that we have clearly more stable production, we have finished production, we have production from Leningrad. I mean, does that mean more planes? I don't know. I don't know how valuable the Leningrad economy really was for the Axis cause, which actually makes me believe that if the Axis were to conquer Leningrad, the production was probably get 2/3 the efficiency of what it could have been if it was under Soviet command. Why? Because it would have been a Third Reich administration, and they had a different way of scorch earthing the factories. They didn't want to use Soviet factories, right? They didn't like Soviet industry, right? And I think that's something that's very clear. I know that military history visualized kind of touches in on this quite a bit. I'm scratching my face right now. But like basically, he kind of hints at the idea that like the Wehrmacht was an army that was using other equipment by other enemies, but for some reason or another, they didn't have that many Soviet technology. They didn't use Soviet anti-tank guns. They didn't use Soviet aircraft. They didn't use Soviet T-34. I guess they did. They eventually did use some T-34s and apparently some modified KV-1s. But I mean, as far as anything else, they weren't using Soviet equipment in the volume or abundance that they may or may have used if it was British equipment or potentially American equipment. But I guess they never captured American equipment because the Americans had strong defensive lines. But like for some reason or another, it appears clear to me that the Wehrmacht didn't use Red Army equipment, and what's up with that? Or maybe the story has yet to be told. Again, we don't really know how that exactly works. Or maybe it was because the Soviets were really disciplined or really strict on destroying all their own equipment so that the Wehrmacht never had equipment to use. But like they did capture a lot of equipment in 41. They could have used a bunch of I-16s, and I don't think they actually chose to. Or they didn't have the manpower available to use the kind of equipment. So there is a lot to unpack there in terms of like what's going on with equipment and who was using what equipment and which factory was designing what. But in our game, like that source is the Leningrad situation that we have, right? The 6 production site that we have. I think it made all the difference. So the question, my question today is how valuable is Leningrad, or was Leningrad rather? How valuable is it exactly? Because, it's clear to me that apparently it's very valuable in World War II, according to this game, but I would probably put it at like a 5, not at a 6, I don't think. So that seems to me more about what's going on as far as the production goes in this game. And you got to keep in mind that the Wehrmacht would have been one of the single largest Axis occupations of the war. I mean, the population of Leningrad was in the millions. How many other cities in Europe were millions of people that were under the Nazi flag, respectfully? Was it Vienna, Budapest, Rome, Berlin? Obviously, it was Berlin. Paris apparently was smaller than or bigger than Paris. Paris has 4 production points, and apparently Leningrad is 6. There is not another single production site in this game. I guess Berlin is 10, but it's a square site. It's not a circle site, so it's different. Is there any other region or in this game that is at a 6? I don't believe there's any other city. Gibraltar? No. It apparently has no production. Madrid is at 2. Rome is also at 2. All these other like Balkan countries are like at 2 or 1. Athens is at 2. Istanbul is at 2. Okay. Bucharest is at 2. They're all square. Belgrade is at 2. Budapest is 3. Vienna is 4. Vienna's 4. I thought it would have also been 5. Königsberg is 1. What about Stockholm? Apparently it's 2 in 42. What about Helsinki? Apparently it's 1 in this game. So it's like, oh, right. So apparently Leningrad is at 6? The only other place is Baku, and that's not even at 2 as well. I mean, we're not even looking at the petroleum that we're producing or like extracting. Stalingrad is at 2. Okay, that actually makes sense. Moscow at 10. Gorky at 3, which is interesting. And there's a lot of like countries out way deep in Siberia that are like pretty high. But Leningrad is at 6, guys. So what gives? I mean, what about Britain? 2, 3, 4, 2, 10. I don't see. What about America? America's not even on the map in this game. There is no other site in the entire map of Eurofront 2nd edition. Abadan is 6, but it's petroleum. It's a mining site, or it's a resource site. It's not a city site. So what's going on with that? Why is Leningrad so valuable in this game? I would have guessed I would have been at a 3 or a 4 or a 2 maybe. I don't think it would have been at a 6. That seems way too high. But clearly the incentive in our game is take Leningrad. So we took Leningrad and succeeded, and I think it shows. So like, I mean, would have been more manpower, would have been more factories. Exactly what could the what could the Ost or rather like Ost government administration do with a city like Leningrad? And that may have been one of the reasons why Adolf Hitler chose not to attack and take the city, because he sort of knew that he didn't know what to do with the city. It was such a large hub. He didn't know what to do with the city. Like even if he took it, then what? Apparently he didn't think deep enough on that. He didn't understand how much history or that Leningrad had on the history of Russia, or I guess even before Lenin was existed, it had another name in like monarchy Russia, which was St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg had quite a rich history. So it's kind of like odd that he didn't take Leningrad. He didn't care about Leningrad, or was he afraid to take it? It makes you wonder quite a bit. It doesn't make sense to me why they didn't take Leningrad, right? Like Leningrad was the one of the easiest objectives to take, and it apparently had economic value, right? So like his goal apparently was obviously the Donetsk region in Ukraine and taking all those like rich oil sites. That's the main reason why he invaded Russia, was for the oil, of course. But outside of that, it's like outside of like the Great Plan for the expansion of the German Empire, the Third German Empire, it's like, well, why not Leningrad? I mean, Leningrad, I mean, apparently there were Germans living in Leningrad, presumably, too, during that time. There was a deep Germanic history in Leningrad, and he didn't want to touch on that. However, if you study World War II, and if you're a military historian at the very least, or yeah, if you're a military historian, or a historian of war, rather, a historian of war, and you study the history of war, and you learn about what happened in Königsberg, and I believe 44 was it, or was it 45? You know, Königsberg is the downfall of Prussia under the rule of the National Socialist government of Germany in 44, of the Third Reich, is what it's called, Third Reich. And it's like Königsberg falls, and it was not an easy city to take. There was a lot of investment, military operation, Wehrmacht units, and like, you know, Tiger tanks or whatever they had. Maybe it wasn't Tiger tanks, but they had a lot of very powerful positions that made it very difficult for the Soviets to actually take the city. By the time the Soviets actually took the city, the Soviet casualties were higher than I think the entire defending group that was defending, right? And I mean, some would succeeded withdrawing, most did not. And so, like, what about the logistics of that, right? I mean, the Red Army pushing into Poland, cutting off Königsberg eventually. And in this game, it's like you can't do siege supplies. If you do siege supplies, your units all go down to cadre. And apparently, the Wehrmacht was still able to hold that cadre strength. It doesn't make sense to me. So presumably a large defensive line was here, and then also here at this other town, so that the supply lines were functional at Torun, right? So I think all these areas must have been fully stacked with German units, like 4-4-4, 4-4-4 formations. You're looking at, I don't know, you're looking at like, I don't know, I mean, if we do the math on that, I think I kind of want to explore that right now before we kind of go back to what we really wanted to do. I think on that, it's like, okay, the intermission is done. I can probably save this file or close it. It's such a good file. Yeah, I mean, it looks so cool. Such a cool little animation there. Let's see if I can. Maybe I can't. I guess we'll, because of time. But like if it's 4-4-4, and let's take all of them are at level 2, so it's like what, 2.5? 2.5 times 4 times 3 hexes, excuse me, not areas. 3 hexes, areas, they're different. Times 22,000. I was gonna put 16,000, which actually may have made more sense. but it's a 660,000 troop defense of the entire Königsberg region. And then if I look up like Siege of Königsberg, Königsberg, it was early 45. The weather, I'm sure, played a big part of it. 1.5 million troops attacked the city. So a lot of Soviet formations attack. What was the Axis defense, though? That's the question. Apparently it was 100... No, that's artillery. 60 to 130,000, presumably troops. 4,000 artillery guns and mortars, 108. Okay, so maybe... Let's look at the casualties. Apparently the Soviet casualties are unknown. But I read one historian who was like saying the casualties were like... I'm presuming that it's on the order of like... Maybe I am assuming. But the order was on like 500,000 or something like this. It was a lot, 600,000 Soviet casualties. And the defense group apparently was no more than 130,000. That may be wrong. That may be simply incorrect. Because it sounded to me like the defense lasted from a long time. Let's look at the date. It was, oh my gosh, it was only the 6th to the 9th of April. Never mind. Okay, I thought it was like a month that they sieged Königsberg. I think this was the final stage of the battle. Yeah, this clearly looks to me like the final stage, the actual assault on the city itself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the siege of Prussia. 45, to be clear, not like 18, whatever. Okay, the East Prussia campaign was 13th until the 25th of April, okay? So February, March, April, you're looking February, right? February, March, April, and that's about 3 to 4 months of time that it took before it fell. And you can see the map here, and it's like, yeah, look at the sweeping operation. I mean, they had a ways to go before they actually got into Prussia. But this is what I'm talking about, and I think this is what the game actually captures. Eurofront seems to capture more about, is the long journey across all these like 60-kilometer hexes. Not the final battle of the city itself, but actually cutting off the city, securing all the areas around the city before you launch the final assault on the city itself. And apparently you can take this upper hex without actually taking Königsberg itself. And according to the map, they did something like that. They took Königsberg first, then they took its final peninsula. They pushed here. Germans bringing launched some counterattacks. That failed. Alright, let's look at the stats on this. Casualties. 1 million Axis troops. Oh no, million Soviet troops. 1.5 million. 580,000 Axis troops. That makes so much more sense. And I calculated what? I calculated that they were mostly an average of 2. But apparently there were a lot of level 1 units as well. But there was a lot of German units stacked up. So like what? Maybe like what? Minus what? 22,000 times 8? Or times 4? What did we get there? So, oh, that's not right. Oh, because I did 1,000. 572? Okay, that might be more closer. 580, yeah. So they would have had 8 level 2s and 4 level 1s, and they probably would have been all mixed up. And that may be more akin to what the Wehrmacht had, and that was the downfall of effectively the Axis connection to the Baltic Sea, from what I understand. Apparently it's the Gulf of Finland or Gulf of Riga in this game, but it's the Baltic Sea. In the long history, the Germanic, apparently Russian history, that all culminated with Leningrad. I mean, right, a lot of the Soviet Navy was operating from Leningrad in these operations that took place. And I'm pretty sure they visited Leningrad. They came from Leningrad. Maybe it was Tallinn. Who knows? Right? But, like, it was a major naval operation as much as it was a land operation. And so Leningrad had a lot of significance. It was one of the major naval bases of the Soviet Navy. Um, why did Adolf Hitler not care about the Navy exactly? Yet he clearly did. That's why he had Donetsk as the naval commander, naval general, naval admiral of the entire, whatchamacallit? You got the Wehrmacht, right? You got the Heer, Luftwaffe, and Kriegsmarine. And so it doesn't make sense why Leningrad wasn't taken in 41 when they clearly had the potential for a strategic initiative, but presumably his priority was Moscow. Yet if you look at the Führer order, I think it's 21, he says that in order to take Moscow, you have to take Leningrad first, and he changed that in the process of Barbarossa. So the whole thing is very convoluted, very kind of vague, but like it doesn't make sense why they didn't prepare for like a long-term conflict, right? Yet there are so many indicators that appear. Obviously, this is in hindsight, but there's so many indicators that suggest that there was going to be a long-term war with the Soviet Union. Maybe not. I mean, maybe the Soviet intelligence or the Soviet information was kept a tight door shut. And then we're not even going to talk about we're not even talking about politics. We're talking about simply the military economic reality of the Third Reich / Wehrmacht and of the Red Army / Soviet Union, effectively. And this game does capture an essence of that. So apparently taking Leningrad was a big deal in our game. That's my takeaway in all of this. And then that may be the difference for why it's so difficult to defend Moscow right now. So I don't know how long the log file has been, but on that note, it's like, all right, to be clear, the time, do I have to say the time zone? The time zone is, it's 4 o'clock GMT minus 5. And so as a result of that, it's like, all right, well, maybe we can figure out what to do with the Red Army. And I don't have a clear solution with the Red Army right now. I mean, spending HQs is super expensive. It's not cheap. We only have one full-strength Chalk Army reserve, fair enough. And it's like, okay, maybe we try to do amphibious landing with this one Soviet division. We could. Where do we land? We land in Mariupol? I think we're going to do it, bro. Like, YOLO. You land in Mariupol with one division and, not expect a German counterattack? What the heck? I don't think it's a good move. And it's an expensive operation. Also, keep in mind the Axis control Rostov, so they control the Sea of Azov. Apparently, there's a Axis Navy presence there. Apparently not the Luftwaffe. So I do come back to the Luftwaffe and I ask, in December 42, exactly how many Luftwaffe planes right now are bombing, perhaps not Moscow, but they're bombing Kaluga and Moshaizk? How many Stukas are dive bombing Soviet defensive positions at the moment? How many Heinkel 111s are bombing ammunition depots and so forth, right? That seems to be what the main strength of the Luftwaffe was by 42, late 42, 43. So it's like, what's going on there? And apparently the Soviets don't have anything. So whatever the Luftwaffe is doing seems to be working, in my opinion. I do want to land in Mariupol, but it's a gamble, and this unit is under strength. If we're going to land there, we might as well land at full strength to withstand whatever Axis counterattack, given the cost of the operation. Or maybe I transfer this HQ to Sevastopol, which we still control, and try to invade Romania or Nikolaev. Does that even change the outcome of the war? Or is it a total distraction? It's hard to say. All right, so I'm going to probably pass with the Soviets. I mean, the Soviets have a reasonably good defensive position. We got a reserve. I mean, I could spend an HQ and swap out units. We probably do. We have the initiative, to be clear. It's the winter time. We have the strategic initiative, but it's like, where do I even want to launch a counteroffensive when my Western HQ is at level 1? This, was it a Baltic HQ? I can zoom in by 1. It's hard to see here. Baltic HQ is level 1. Okay. We got a 6th tank army in Kalinin. Ooh, that's actually quite powerful. We actually have a lot of strong Soviet formations in the northern flank. I'm thinking like, man, they may be exactly enough to launch some kind of offensive operation against the Germans in the sector. Unfortunately, we don't have an HQ to do it. All the HQs are at level 1, and it's December, not November 42, which is when the Soviet counteroffensive operations began. At Stalingrad, they started in November 42, not December. So the initiative was there, and I don't think the Soviets have the favorable weather, but it's like if we don't attack, what's going to happen? So I'm thinking, I don't have a reserve right now to replace any casualties at Ryazk. It's kind of like a 50-50 chance of succeeding at Ryazk, depending on the die roll. We probably have the advantage, we have slightly more hit bonuses, but we can't take that many hits ourselves. So we need more reserves. I need at least one additional Soviet army here as a reserve, and it's like that reserve army is too busy defending over here at Ryazk. I could try to launch an attack and retake Tula, because it seems inevitable that the Germans are going to cross the river, but maybe I let them cross the river and then we counterattack. That might be the better move. Do I have a Soviet shock army in reserve? I don't. Do I have a full-strength Stavka? I do. And it's like, well, maybe I gotta like spend Stavka right now and use all these super understrength units and just try to retake some Soviet territory to at least have a bit of like a morale effect on the situation is what I'm thinking. And go ahead and spend Stavka offensively if I can. And expand territory, like regardless of the quality of the units, we obviously need to build up way more units. Right, we got a lot more Soviet units to build up. But I'm thinking if we have a full strength Stavka, let's spend it, and let's not do nothing. Or maybe we wait. You got to figure out if you want to use Stavka defensively or offensively. It's hard to do both, and it's like ideally you want to do them both offensively and defensively. And so maybe what I got to do is not do anything and pass on the turn, which doesn't seem like the right call. But I'm gonna go ahead and do that anyways. All right, so that's that. We're going to pass for the Soviets because their production is just too low right now. And now we'll switch over to the Wehrmacht finally. Presumably the Wehrmacht are going to kind of continue their like Stalingrad-like assault on Moscow and just grind their way through the winter. Their casualties have been high. Let's do that assessment, right? I think now maybe the right time, maybe a bit too early, to assess exactly. Hopefully you guys saw those stats. But I kind of like assess what the casualties look like. Hold on. Huh. That's strange. I thought I got a fresh pack of batteries. Alright, well, I think my mouse... Probably need a new pack of batteries apparently. And I believe I've already used up. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a new pack. Dang it. No, it looks like the battery totally died on my mouse. Which is odd because I believe I had packed a new pack of batteries, but apparently I did not. Alright, well, because of the video, we can continue. But it's going to be a little trickier to, like, drag stuff around. But, like, dang it, this is not what I wanted to do. But I do want to, like, preserve some kind of momentum here. Oh my goodness. I need to get more batteries for sure. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to seems like I have to compromise here. But it seems like, what was the question? Let's assess the Soviet casualties, right? So if we look at July, August, September, October, right? Those are the 4 months in which the Germans basically assaulted Moscow. And we had Soviet casualties in July are 12, plus 11 in August, plus 15 in September, plus 10 in October. What about November? I think November went down. Oh, my computer needs to be charged. Yeah, we could definitely start the video, or stop the video here, rather. But apparently it's 48 steps. Multiply that by what again? 25? It's 1.2 million. It's 1.2 million. So the casualties, that's actually not that high. So in total, including June, which there were a big amount of encirclements, I would say it was now a total of like 2.2 million Soviet casualties so far. I haven't included November, but 2.2 million casualties for the Red Army is not that high compared to what we've been dealing with, in like, as far as the historical casualties go. I mean, Stalingrad was at 1.5 million. So it's like, man, I guess Stalingrad must have been very costly for the Soviet Stavka to defend. They must have fought tooth and nail, industrially and so forth, to really hold on to the city. It's not like it was necessarily a bunch of cadres defending the city that allowed the defense of the city to work. There was a bunch of other things that were going on, notably the Soviet counterattacks in the north, and eventually the Soviet winter operations. So this game is doing it very differently, right? But it shows that the Soviets have established somewhat of a functional means to defend Moscow, and it shows the German casualties are quite high. Let's assess the German casualties, right? Starting in July. I can create a new tab for that. July is 7. Axis in August is 11. September is 15 also. And then October is 19. Oof. That was brutal. Wow. So it's 1.2 million for the Axis. That's Moscow. As far as the casualty assessment goes, this is a much higher than what we had at Stalingrad. Let's also include June. It's 28. I think the total casualties at Stalingrad for the Axis is like 600,000. Maybe there's more. Again, let's do more research on that. I got a bunch of tabs open. Probably a bunch of stupid burn carriers. Yeah, we don't need all that right now. Okay. War and Peace. Brand carriers. Good. I'm gonna clean up shop here. 6-pounder. Yeah, this was all old research. The Mark 8, Case Blue. Probably actually more along those lines. Here is Stalingrad, right? We can close that. Yeah, I don't think we need any of that. Not right now, not today, because of the video. Then we got talking about Europe and Gulf, the Vestia, very relevant. And then we got all these calculations, Eastern Front analysis. I can open up again. Intermission. These casualties were the Königsberg campaign, which we haven't even played in this game. Siege of Prussia 45. Prussia, not Russia. East Prussia offensive. Fascinating. Commercials. Okay, so let's go back to Case Blue, right? I'll keep one Brand Carrier tab open. let's go back to Case Blue. And I don't want to focus on Case Blue. I want to focus on the Battle of Stalingrad, which apparently is not the same as Case Blue. By the time Case Blue kind of fizzled out, Stalingrad had started, and it was like a different plan than what they had planned originally. But like, let's find out what were the casualties at Stalingrad, right? And that's kind of the question here right now. So if you made it this far in the video, you have earned the right to give the video a like, because it shows that you are somebody who is studying history at a deep level, at a profound level, and doing it at perhaps even a professional level. So yeah, you definitely earn the right to like the video. So let's look at the Soviets and Axis casualties both first. And then I think the total casualties were 2.5 million. According to this, the casualties and losses were 800,000 to 1.5 million for the Axis, which makes a lot more sense. And then the Soviet side, was like, you get different figures from different historians. Krivoshev says 1.1. Perez Legin says 1.3, 1.4. But like half killed or missing, the other wounded, and or sick. But my understanding is that it was apparently the total is 1 to 2 million. It's odd to me that no one has a clear figure on that. That's quite a very large gap, if you ask me. Now, if we look at Case Blue, right, and this is what I did when I studied Stalingrad the first time, I really focused on like the before and after Case Blue, because pretty much the ending of Case Blue, or the ending of the second Axis summer offensive, ends with them having lost or gained no territory effectively, and you learn that from like World War II in Color documentary. And that essentially set up the conditions for the Kharkov offensive, counteroffensive rather, and the Battle of Kursk that followed. But let's look at total casualties for Case Blue. Here it says 200,000. So maybe I think they updated that on Wikipedia, but I'm presuming those 200,000 were in the lead up to. Excluding 150,000 casualties in the first phase of the Battle of Caucasus. Okay. What about the dates? When did the operation officially ended? Okay, it ended November 24th of November. I don't believe they're actually including any information. Wikipedia, to be clear, is including any casualties at the moment for Stalingrad. Apparently Stalingrad was not part of Case Blue. It was a different operation, which makes a lot of sense. But how is what's the difference between Stalingrad and Case Blue? Because someone who's been studying military history or history, World War II, since middle school, which was 2008. So it's been what is that? 18 years now? Wow. I've been studying this for 18 years and it's not clear to me the exact difference. So it shows to me that if there is a information on that no one seems to have it all kind of condensed into one simplified final answer. So there's room for conclusion or assessment or something along these lines. But talk about a mess, man, as far as information and history and so forth. I mean, the single largest urban battle in human history, and it's we still don't even know whether or not it was part of a larger operation, or maybe we do, some do. But it's it's in a lot of deep history books. And it's man, you really have to take the time to order them online, right? And then B, order them on Amazon.com. And then B, once you purchase the book, actually taking the time to sit there and read it, if you have the patience to read a book like that, it might take hours, days. It takes a time to read a book like that, you know? I think it takes like at least 3 days nonstop, reading like 10 hours the whole day to actually finish one of those books. I mean, we're talking like 1,000-page long books. It takes like at least 3 days to read it. So if you're somebody who's able to read a book like that in 3 days, and you're able to like have everything else in your day to day taken care of, well done. But yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. But it's clear that with updating Wikipedia that there's clearly a difference between Case Blue and Stalingrad. And as far as like the nature of like we haven't even talked about Oberkommando des Heer and Oberkommando des Wehrmacht, two different chains of commands that were operating in different directions. Apparently, as a result of that, the operation like complicated, right? So, in trying to win the war, right? After the failure at Moscow, after the failure of Barbarossa, trying to defeat and conquer Russia, essentially. So, as a result of that, let's try to do it. Let's try to conquer Russia in our game. Let's do it. All the HQs are at full strength, which is really cool. The Wehrmacht Panzer Corps that are around Moscow are actually pretty battered. 75% operational capability. Do I have any full strength Panzer Corps at the moment? No. Not any that are in reserve, but we do have a lot of strong infantry. I think my move right now is to cross this river. Right? I mean, across the Oka River because it's frozen and we are the Wehrmacht. We're going to cross the river. I think we're going to just start pouring in infantry. We have the manpower, apparently. Exactly how much manpower do we have around Moscow? It's good to know. But I'm going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Do I include Yask? Probably. That's another 24, 26, and then all the way down to Voronezh. Two more, that's 28. And I guess the average there is like, what, 3.5? So it's actually 3 plus the 0.5, so it's like actually an average of 4. So 4 times 28 times 22,000 in terms of like manpower, exclusively manpower. Oh, I wasn't able to connect. Looks like I lost Wi-Fi. Oh. Let's see, I have to connect one more time here. See if the Wi-Fi works. If not, I can pull out my calculator. Let's see what we got here. 2.4 million troops. Not bad. Case Blue. Let's see how many troops we had for Case Blue historically. How much the German army, the Axis army, had. They had about 1.5 to 1.8. So we have more Axis troops. And clearly they're all German. They're not any Hungarian or Italian or Romanian. So I would say we have much more fighting capability here, which is kind of cool. Let's see like how many Panzer Corps are available. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wow. About 11 Panzer Corps. Presumably 2 Panzer divisions per corps. So you're looking at 22 Panzer divisions. All right, new tab here. 22. I think the Wehrmacht had, I think the number was 371 Panzer IIIs per division. 41. Let's see how many divisions. We got like 8,000 tanks. I'm not sure if they're all operational or not, but it's much more than what we had in Case Blue, that's for sure. That's how many tanks we have in Case Blue. Not very much. Apparently, about 2,000 tanks slash tank guns. I guess those were operational. I'm presuming. So I mean, our operational. I don't know exactly how you calculate that, but I guess you multiply it by like what point times 3/4, and you end up with 6,000. 3 times more armor. I don't even know if that seems right, but we have a lot of Panzer armies, right? We're Panzer Corps, 11 Panzer Corps. So yeah, it could be the equivalent of 2 or 3 Panzer armies, or 4 Panzer armies. And it appears to be like, it appears to be something. Having something to do with something. Having something to do with something, for sure. Panzer armies? How many Panzer Corps do they have in Case Blue? Yeah, good luck trying to find an answer in that question. I know they had the 2 Panzer armies. Panzer Fourth and the Panzer First, if I'm not mistaken. Right now we have like what, 4 or 5 Panzer armies. So apparently that's 3 times more tanks. I don't know if that's necessarily correct or not. Because, we have the manpower from Leningrad. Apparently we have more armor from Leningrad too. Apparently this formation may be comprised of T-34s. Something along these lines. Right? If the Wehrmacht decided to have preserved the Soviet tank factories at Leningrad, they were there, they probably would have been able to produce a few hundred T-34s, I would imagine, per year, at the very least. And it's like, did the Wehrmacht have any interest in using a T-34? Who knows? But I guess in our game, it's like pretty clear that is part of the Totalkrieg that's been activated back in like, what was it? Like probably August 42? The speech was made? Or December 42? Not yet. Or maybe around this time, who knows? But from this point forward, they're using like armored T-34s. Again, it's hard to say. Oh, I need more batteries on this mouse. Oh man, so it's like I may even have to stop the video here because I need to get more batteries to like really play the game smoothly. We haven't even like started to move around and click around all the units, and it's like I may have to stop the video here. Unfortunately, I really wanted to keep going, but we're doing well on time. Yeah, and I did unmute myself, thank goodness. But yeah, I think I may have to stop the video here. It's been quite a long video, so I think the timing is good. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. To be clear, we haven't even finished the log file, so I guess I'll probably start the log file again in the next one. Because the British, all we did was just move one British HQ. I'm going to undo all that. I'm just going to backspace all of that. We'll start all over. It was like literally 3 moves. We'll start all over. Because it's much simpler to like do every video have it like synchronized or in alignment with, whichever you may call it. Have it like, have it, have it moving like moving at the same time as having it moving it at the same time as like having it moving at the same time as the videos that we're making here, right? So this channel is for a awesome gaming channel. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I really do intend that the audience here, number one, enjoys the content. Number two, is learning about, military history, World War II military history, to be clear. And it's like, why? Because it's, there's a lot to unpack that has not been fully understood yet. And it seems like a lot of people right now are working very hard to like uncover a lot of the mysteries of World War II, which you would think because it was so recent that like it's a well documented event, and it's like you'd be surprised as to how many gaping holes apparently are there. So it's a long endeavor to understand the war in a like wholesome way. And so there's a lot of incredible YouTube channels. There's too many at the moment to for me to like list right now in this video. But it's like, if it weren't for these, historian channels, right, which are effectively the next gen of historians that are coming about for World War II historians, like, I mean, where would it be to, like, understand, where would it be to understand um, this conflict? So, yeah, there's a lot more work to be done. There's a lot more parts of World War II to uncover and to understand. But for now, we're really committed to effectively the Eastern Front. Although I guess the Western Front, the Vestia, is effectively the same as the Ostia. It's the same. It's the same army. It's the same Wehrmacht. So as a result of that, it's like, yeah. This game captures that really, really, really well. There is no Asia Front version of this game. Why? Because of all the naval operations and the nature of the naval operations and so on. So that doesn't exist at the present moment. But of course, like Europe and Gulf does have an Asia and Gulf as well as Europe and Gulf. Maybe that's something that we have to return to down the road. Is play a full Europe and Asian Gulf both simultaneously. I mean, how long is the playing time for a game like that? There may be too many scenarios to explore to actually be able to play it all in one weekend or something along these lines. But if you are enjoying the content, if you're enjoying the channel, of course, give it a like, comment, help the channel grow. Let other people know about the game. Reach out to invite people, invite peers to, whoever you are in contact with to play these games, right? Whichever game you're a fan of. It doesn't necessarily have to be Europe and Golf. It can be whatever kind of wargaming you're into. But like they all seem to have some kind of like common domain in terms of like understanding the game. So of course, it all takes time, and it takes effort and process and like a lot of like information has to be exchanged. But for now, of course, you're welcome to play against me. As far as finding the time and everything, we would have to definitely organize our schedules to get that going. But maybe because of time, we may not have the time to really play a full game at the moment. But I would say like consider the possibility, or consider like it's certainly on my bucket list to like be able to play a really good war game with somebody down the road, because there's a lot to unpack in a game like that. I mean, we're not even this is war gaming, right? This is not 40 war hammering or whatever that is. This is simply like good old fashioned like tabletop, Panzer Army conquest, something along those lines. And so, yeah, thank you so much for paying attention and being inquisitive in exploring the questions that you're seeking. As speaking as regardless of the label, speaking as somebody who wants to know more about, say, World War II, right? Like World War II is personally one of the most fascinating wars. We're not talking about World War One for the sake of the video or for the sake of the channel. There may be a better channels that are dedicated for that, frankly, or practically rather. But yeah, I will stop the video here. I really wanted to continue. But because of the timing of everything, it appears to me quite clear that we will have to save that for another time. Ideally, I'm doing this like on Sundays is what I'm believing today is free day. So I'm thinking on Sundays is the day to play on a day like a Friday today. But effectively, I may consider doing live streams, right? But it really depends on who wants to join, right? It depends on who's available, who wants to join, how busy everybody is. as far as like, you know, work-life balance and everything like that. So of course, we'll have to wait and see. It seems to me. I think kind of getting feedback from I guess the subscribers of this channel. You know, I could make this channel like subscriber only, and maybe that's something that might be a better way to kind of like move forward, considering that it is a limited channel. Um, yeah, maybe do something along those lines for sure. But yeah, I'll stop here. Um, there was something else that I wanted to say to kind of wrap this video up. But it says something along the lines of like basically streaming and talking about what can we do to dive deep into a game like this, right? So it might take time. It might take you know, who knows how long it might take, right? But there's a lot of information here to unpack. That seems clear as day. And we haven't even jumped into the dice rolls, right? We haven't even done any dice rolls in this an actual playthrough that we've done. So that to me is really fascinating. How we haven't even done a single dice roll, or rather die roll, in this game. Haven't done a single die roll in this game, or in this whatchamacallit. So yeah, I'll stop here. Do take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.